Welcome everyone, Simon here from the Wales of Wall Street. We have a very quick video just around the topic of DePin. So DePin, the Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Networks, or DEPIN is the abbreviation that many have seen for a while now. This is a topic actually we've talked about so many times in all our videos. And the reason I'm kind of bringing this to this channel is to kind of build on that narrative and a bit better understanding as to what this actually is about. I'm not a huge fan of like specific narratives within the blockchain sphere. We've seen NFTs, have had its day. I think DePin is one of those things that people just throw out willy-nilly. I've been to several events this year where panelists or speakers have just shouted out DePin as a topic, and then when audience members have asked them, okay, what about DePin, what are you excited about it, they can't give an answer. So this is always a bit of a problem in the blockchain crypto space, is like all these abbreviations, these narratives get thrown out, and there's not really a true understanding as to like what's the actual benefit of this, or are people just jumping on hype wagons to say that we are this, we are that? It's a bit of a mixture of all these things as well, and I think it's quite expected in the space. But for me personally, I always like to delve, as hopefully many of you know, delve into the detail of what this actually means. So really quickly, before I show you a few topics around this area, there's a really good article that I want to show you as well. I'll leave a link to it at the end of this, or in this video. We talked about on the channel things like direct to cyclic graph, the ability or utility of artificial intelligence linking heavily with blockchain technology and the Internet of Things, as well as cloud, loads of merging technologies basically. And when I mean by merging, I don't mean they're emerging as in coming out of nowhere. They're merging together, they're working together. And in a recent video where I kind of touched on the point of blockchain kind of being like a really big infrastructure or a data point that AI could be built on or utilize to essentially use almost as real-time and kind of validated proof to make a decision. So DePin is very heavily orientated around the utility of blockchain, artificial intelligence predominantly, but I believe and feel massively, and you'll see a lot of scripts and articles, scholarships around the integration of IoT as well, because ultimately that physical infrastructure network part is very much integrated with what we're talking about here. And we've talked about in the past, some of our favorite projects like iota or iotx, which we'll mention in a minute as well, because partially from a category influence on CoinMarketCap. These guys have been dealing with IoT products. IoT, for those that don't know or are new to the channel, again, we talked about this previously, is Internet of Things. This is pretty much anything that is a device or an appliance that is connected to the internet, pretty much through Wi-Fi predominantly. This could be smart cameras, smart bulbs, heating, like the Nest or the Hive units that we have here in the UK, washing machines, now kettles, you name it. And why are we allowing this, or why has this even happened? Well, we know for a fact that we've got the ability of a more efficient lifestyle, a more lifestyle based around we're so busy, we don't have time to do this and the other. We actually want something to automatically come online or start working in a few hours time based on what we're doing, where we are. Good example, maybe a bit random, but a lot of people do it. If you've got a Wi-Fi washing machine, for example, most people have like the old ones with the timer on it, but the Wi-Fi could actually insinuate, based on environmental data, that actually it's a sunny day, therefore we should get the washing going like now. You're at work, you're going to be back at this time, the dryer will kick in, all these things. Okay, maybe one of the only things missing there is a robot to take it out of the machine and put it out or whatever, if you're not about. But that's the mini principle of it. Or in the industries that I've worked in the past, I've worked heavily in AI and IoT specifically, so I like to think I know hopefully what I'm talking about here. But in the smart sort of security element, a camera could identify based on geolocation that you're near your home, or your router knows this, and therefore lights or certain lights will turn on, certain heating in certain rooms, knowing which ones you're either in, based on your geolocation within the house, or that you use XYZ rooms more than the others at different times. All of these things require the connection, which is why we talk about emerging technologies, about IoT. We talk about 5G, 6G, the connectivity there. Obviously, Wi-Fi is part of that, of course. Albeit 5G technology is really advancing heavily, as is 6G, 7G is being very much progressed right now in some countries. But yeah, 5G, 6G on that kind of tipping point. And as I said, with blockchain, holding like data, smart contracts, and artificial intelligence being able to act upon that, make a decision for you potentially, or at least understand the real-time data and provide a potential opportunity of a decision or an idea or a thought. And this is where we've talked about in the past about machine learning, deep learning. Again, I've worked in these industries. They're absolutely amazing. I go back like 10 years, real intricate, detailed advancement in these areas, being able to identify a person wherever they are, what they're wearing, were they cycling, color clothes, whatever it might be. And then like percentage data of that person's thermal recognition is very high. What's their probability or potential risk factor that they might do something aggressive later on that day, the probability. I mean, these are things that will come into play over the years for sure. I know like from a military perspective, this is heavily used in some application. And it loops back around to my point I've made in previous videos about transactions. So we talk about blockchain, or some chains talk about really high transactions per second, TPS. It's like, well, what does that actually mean? Like, okay, we understand that, users or retail investors can understand transactions per second in terms of how many transactions have been done between you and I trading, for example. But beside that, where developers, companies, projects are building on top of these chains, the transactions per second become very lucrative from the testing perspective, from the building perspective, then having everything working on that system. I've always said that a transaction isn't just a financial entity of movement. It's also a transfer of an action. So I may sound like a repeated broken record here, but for those that haven't been on the channel before with us, this is how I'm trying to relate this to DePin, which again we'll go on to in more detail shortly in a second. But you have to understand the fundamentals of it here and then link up how this works in your minds. So the transfer of an action can simply be something like I just mentioned earlier, or it could be something very complex. For example, agriculture, who are now really developing technology relating to 5G, 6G operated tractors and harvesting machines, or even drones, for example. But when would they go and harvest? When would they go and seed crops? And usually that's a manual process, or a farmer for decades or generations would go, yes, it's winter now, we must start putting in these seeds for spring, summer, etc., etc. But now, because polar shifts and climate change and all the other variables, some are nonsense, some are real, incorporate this factor that automation could come in to make this more efficient and actually more real time. We could avoid things like potential waste of cost and finances, logistics, emissions, all of these things that are really big narratives in the world right now, sustainability, ESG goals, etc. And for us as users who can use QR codes using blockchain, AI, etc., scanning QR codes to find out where something actually came from, the sustainability, the whole pathway of it. It's all part of the process and the planning moving forward. So these tractors, these drones can now go, right, based on trend data of history, and that we know in real time the environmental factors that are going on and the trend patterns of what, the temperature might be, the soils, scientific components and elements within it, the minerals, etc. Is this a good time, bad time to do stuff? And then from that whole entire process, that is an action in itself, a transfer, but then also operating the fact of when it needs to harvest, then how does it package that up, logistically send that out? Are we then in 5-10 years time using vehicles more so than ever before that are EV compatible, which have eSIMs in them, which also need to be on the wireless or charging systems, the whole entire new system of transportation using blockchain AI? So you can start to really piece together that these 10,000, 20,000 transactions per second are going to get eaten up very quickly because you've got all of these things going on worldwide simultaneously. So the adoption of things like AI, IoT, blockchain working together will make sure we get the best quality possible in those transactions per second, I get my words out, and the efficiency of that. So we've got the speed and the efficiency of this as well. So we loop back in. I'm just going to bring this up on the screen here. We loop this back into the point that many of these devices, IoT applied, AI applied, blockchain applied, can now relate to physical real world infrastructure. So we go back to that point of what is DePin. I'm not going to read this word for word because there's a lot of channels out here that talk about it for sure, and there's a lot of articles, and definitely we'll leave these ones in there. But look at this, talking specifically about machine learning, deep learning. So machine learning is a machine being able to talk to another machine to say that, right, we've learned this and we're now going to evolve from it. What can we take from these deep learning factors, whether it's me as a person or the things I'm wearing, etc., as I mentioned earlier, or it's based on things like image analytics, from biopsies in healthcare, for example. It's the agricultural things, the soil, for example, as I mentioned. And then the machines can then start learning more and more about, we're going to take over this. We don't need you humans anymore to input this data or manually change things. We can work this out for ourselves. And then, of course, things like GPUs kicking in, processing power, which will go into quantum for sure, quantum formalities over these coming years properly, significantly. And this requires a lot of validation, processing, transparency, all the things that you can get from blockchain, including smart contracts, the signing of contracts, the transactions, as we've mentioned as well. This goes on to the data processing, and that's when the AI and things kick in. But IoT is the Internet of Things. This is the appliance or the machineries, whatever you want to call them, start linking up together with this. So in a nutshell, we must first learn about decentralized infrastructure networks to understand how AI and crypto will be used together. So it says pretty much a mention around here, decentralized physical infrastructure networks, or DePin, are blockchain protocols that build, maintain, and operate infrastructure in the physical world in an open and decentralized manner. DePins using cryptocurrency tokens, or utility of the tokens, in other words, to incentivize the building of real world infrastructure. So it's a bit of a mix up here. That mentions a few companies here, of course, but we'll go into a bit more detail about some of those in a second. But that is very much the ultimate aspect of it, is pulling in these merging technologies. They're basically given what I kind of talked about for many years now, and certainly that merging technology aspect. I always refer to direct to cyclic graph as a formality of blockchain that can really enhance and take this on board. I would suggest that DePin is kind of like the narrative or the overlaying umbrella word that gives an abbreviated version of what we already talk about. So hopefully that gives a bit more of an understanding of context and tries to kind of break that down a bit more. Because as I said, I personally find it a bit agitating when you go to events, whether you expect people that know what they're talking about or been there for a long time. I always expect someone to be able to explain to perhaps audience members that are either trying to learn or want to know more about this. And I think DePin is just, as I said, it's one of those things that get bashed about, thrown about. I'm probably suspect to this in the sense that I'm doing a video on DePin, which a lot of other channels are doing, and hopefully from this one and others that you do research on, you get a bit of a better understanding. But I think it's really important to showcase the examples of this specifically, and it can definitely relate to a multitude of sectors and industries around the world. Again, we talk about most of these on many of the videos that we do on the channel. Healthcare, I mentioned about imagery analytics and how that can work with infrastructure, with AI, blockchain, etc. And we can talk about the energy sector all day long. I won't go into massive detail because I've just done a big one on EWT yesterday, Energy Web, and we talk about this quite significantly. In fact, go and check out the recent interview we did with Dr. Vivek from Power Ledger. Ironically, the specific conversation of blockchain and AI integration with their, I can't remember the exact wording of it, but it's their algorithmic project and platform that they've been building or working on, which pretty much pulls this in. I don't think we mentioned the wording of DePin in there, but that's very much what we're talking about here, the infrastructure and the ability to merge these technologies together. because we can't do everything virtually. We can't do everything digitally. We have to rely on real world physical infrastructure. And that could be a battery capacity, as I've said in previous videos, where we can become prosumers or share that information or data or carbon credits around with each other or as a community. It can be related to many of the examples that I gave earlier in this video. So that is very much the basics or basis of DePin. And I wanted to quickly show you this. Take it with a tiny pinch of salt. I think it's missed a few off here, but there's definitely a lot of projects here that are heavily related to IoT infrastructure or infrastructure in general in the physical world, or indeed systems like Filecoin, for example, very heavily orientated around decentralization of cloud storage, which is absolutely a huge technology merger for all these things that we talk about. I've held eGold Multiverse, which used to be Elrond, for a long time. That is definitively one that's very exciting. iotx is a very familiar one to me, just purely from my experience in IoT infrastructure and application of this in the real world. Worked many years in the IoT sectors, and this is definitely one that caught my interest with the ability of smart tracking. You think about like your fitness watches, your smart watches, all of this is data gathering, guys, and you eventually, hopefully some of these will open up like you can with tokenized assets to be able to sell your data to companies or infrastructures to be able to make definitive decisions environmentally or whatever it might be for healthcare, etc. It's really interesting, exciting times, some cases scary times. But this as an investor is very exciting indeed. You see all the amount of different devices that are connected via iotx system, and this is the point I'm mentioning, transactions. This isn't just financial transactions, this is also the transfer of actions within some of their IoT products that they have to their offering to customers. I don't know if it's still around. It's used to be called the Pebble. I have to double check that, but there it is, Pebble. Again, it's kind of like a little tracker kind of thing. It's probably advanced since the first ones that I saw a couple years ago, but it was trying to build data around humidity and your fitness and all this kind of stuff. And like the more data you have, guys, the more we can start applying answers and solutions to real world problems. I think that's the beauty of the abilities of blockchain and AI working together. There's obviously some bad things about it, but I like to think if this is in the right hands in some cases, that we can really push forward and make the world better and improve our health, improve our lifestyle, improve our environment that's around us and externally from our immediate environments as well. Internet computer ICP has obviously took the storm of the markets over the last couple of years. With its launch price was absolutely huge. It has died down significantly. That doesn't mean the project is dead. It's obviously had a very good launch campaign, and people just need to understand that's just how it works. If you have higher value price points, it does come down eventually for sure. I think that's what people are getting a bit annoyed about with ICP's token price over the last sort of year-ish. But it's definitely got a lot more to come ahead. But this article here I'll leave at the end of this video and in the description. It's a really cool little breakdown. We talked about some of the frameworks, the usage of ledger technology, real world utility. I think is the key point here. Don't have to always use these abbreviations and categorizations of things. It's really about understanding what exactly does this do. And not get too bogged down, oh, this is an ISO coin, oh, this is a DePin coin, oh, this is, real world asset coin. Just think more about what it actually does, like how is it actually operating and working. And as an investor's perspective, looping that back round to seeing the market value or opportunity in the future. You think about how many appliances, how many machine operated things there are at the moment, what that could be different in the next 5-10 years, becoming more and more digital and utilizing AI, blockchain, IoT, cloud, all these things together. 5G, 6G, I mentioned earlier, mainly because if you're going to use drones, etc., you're going to be either using Starlink as a GPS and internet connection, or you're going to be using 5G, 6G. That's why these infrastructures are so important for this all to work. Helium network, I don't know if you remember, I used to do videos on these guys. It's so cool. You can basically get antennas and big massive routers you can stick on the side of your house or on your roof and earn the HNT token. It was basically a Web3 hotspot, to utilize the internet, and is creating its own infrastructure. It's really cool, fully decentralized, and you're very energy efficient to an extent, as well as being able to obtain HNT tokens in your wallets. But the point here being is that you've got a people powered network, but when we go back to that conversation about connectivity, it's just another infrastructure. There's no rule and law to say that there should just be one or two only ways that we can connect with each other, or connect around the world, or connect to devices and things. This is the insane thing about the fourth industrial revolution. The only one of few things that I like from the World Economic Forum is they call it what it is. And the fourth industrial revolution is now. And it's not just blockchain. It is literally these merging technologies coming together. And as I said, there's a scary point to it, and especially if it's in the wrong hands. But if it's in the good hands and we try and keep as much of it as possible decentralized, it could do some massive benefit to the world. So that's the kind of thing I'm clinging on to most. But I am, of course, skeptical in most of these things because, well, one, I go to events where I know specifically that companies and banks and institutions are trying to take over a lot of this. They're catching up. You'd be amazed how many parliamentary members and things, still ask the questions of things like, what's the internet? How does that work? And all this kind of stuff. And that's the principal factor, is that once they catch up, or they get note of it or smell of it, they start to try and really accelerate that opportunity to try and take it back, which is why I think a lot of blockchain, crypto, AI services will become more centralized. We have this imagination in our head that everything will be decentralized, will be free, but that's not always how the world works. So it's definitely an interesting space to come. But this DePin narrative is for sure something that will definitely take off. I don't think it's going to be a narrative necessarily that kind of spikes up a bull market, but it'll certainly be one of the key narratives. I think CBDCs is for sure going to be another one, because that, again, it all links together, guys. It all links together. It's the whole point of it. Programmability, digitalization, automation, autonomous is all the key attributes to what DePin is really about. And it needs these infrastructures, especially the physical infrastructures, in place to be able to actually really work in the real world. As I said, no one, or not many people really want to work in the virtual world. We need things to work here and now in our physical capacity. So that's a bit of a background, guys, a bit of a deep dive into DePin. Hopefully it's been interesting. As I said, I'll leave that article and some of these links in the descriptions below as well. But yeah, I think it's definitely something that's obviously been an abbreviation and topic for near enough 6-7 months properly, and it's coming more into fruition for sure. And I think it's just one of those things, you just got to be calm and collected about it. Don't get too bogged down about trying to chase specific coins in these certain categories, but just understand what it is and understand the magnitude of what's to come in the years to come as well. And definitely get excited about it, because whether it's a good or bad pathway that it eventually goes down, as an investor, there's only one way that it's going to go, in my opinion, for sure, and it's that in itself is in a positive way. So let us know what you think in the comments below. If you want us to talk about this topic in more depth, or any other specific topics outside of the usual utility tokens and the chains themselves, do let me know. I've got a lot of stuff in my head all the time. And I talk about this regularly on, speaking on panels or at events, etc. So definitely up for doing anything else that you guys want me to cover. So keep me in the loop, drop those comments for sure. Hope you enjoyed this. Hopefully you learned something. We'll see you in the next topic related video. Take care and bye bye.